Welcome to the Take Two Teacher Instructional Material Training for 6th through 8th grade math. Today we will review the following items in this training: Take Two program description, instruction material components, math focus standards, math daily overview, math instructional block, components of the instruction material. Program description. Take Two for middle school gives 6th through 8th grade students an opportunity to retake the end of grade test. Prior to the re-administration of the test, students will be provided 9 days of instruction in math. The EOG for math will be re-administered on the last day of Take Two. The instructional components will include a workbook for teachers and a workbook for students. The teacher's workbook will include math focus standards, math daily overview, math daily schedule breakdown, daily lessons, which is broken up by day, test prep / overall review, calculator practice, math activities and games. The student's workbook will include daily lesson overview, daily lessons, calculator practice, math activities and games. Math focus standards. On your screen, you'll see the heavily weighted standards for 6th grade. This will be our focus for the next 9 days for 6th graders. The first standard is the number system, which is 27 to 32% of the test for 6th grade, and expressions and equations, which is 27 to 32% of the test. For 7th grade, we will focus on ratios and proportional relationships, which is 22 to 27% of the test, expressions and equations, which is 22 to 27% of the test, and geometry, which is also 22 to 27% of the test. For 8th grade, we'll focus on expression and equations, which again is 27 to 32% of the test, then functions, which is 22 to 27% of the test, and geometry, which is 20 to 25% of the test. Daily overview. In the instruction materials provided, you'll see a sheet that looks like this, which is the daily overview. On this daily overview, you'll see that each lesson is broken up by day, standard, weight and question, and content. So for example, the very first one on this 6th grade daily overview, you see on 6/14, which is the very first day, the standard we'll focus on is NS1. The weight of that particular standard is 27 to 32% of the test, and that means there's approximately 3 questions related to that standard on the test. And then the name of the unit, which would be, in this case, divide with fractions. And you'll see that for every day of the program. This is a sample of 7th grade. Again, you see it's broken out by day, standard, weight and question, and the content area. And again for 8th grade. The daily schedule for middle school will be an hour and a half, or 90 minutes. Each instructional block will be 90 minutes, and when you're looking at math, we have divided that out into 5 minutes for vocabulary review, 30 minutes for modeled and guided instruction, 20 minutes for guided practice, 20 minutes for common core practice in small group, and then 15 minutes for calculator practice. Now, some of the days you'll notice that the schedule has been revamped. That may be based on a unit assessment, which usually would mean the next day the instructional schedule may look different. So, a general daily lessons. The first part of the lesson would be vocabulary review. In the student book and in the teacher book, you'll see a frayer. It's not your typical frayer. We're just focusing on vocabulary. The frayer for the teacher has already been completed, but it's blank in the student's book. So the thinking is to pull out the key vocabulary for that lesson and having students define that vocabulary word and then writing problems or equations that are samples of that vocabulary word. The purpose is to get them refreshed with that vocabulary word so that they're able to, when they think of that word, think of that example. And this is a sample of what the Frayer will look like in the student's workbook. The next part of the lesson is modeled and guided instruction. This is about 30 minutes. This portion of the lesson allows teachers to teach the concept and allows students to participate with guided independence. So some of them they're able to either work with a partner or they're able to do some of that work independently while the teacher is circulating to make sure that they're understanding the concept. The nice part about the lesson is that they give an opportunity each time for students to practice what was modeled before they go out to fully independent without any teacher supervision. Again, for guided practice, this is an opportunity really for students to work independently, although right before that we could work with a partner. This piece, you really want students to work independently because this is the last opportunity that they would be able to work with teachers' assistants. So a student would actually get an opportunity to work on the material independently while the teacher is circulating. This is a great opportunity for teachers to note if students are still having a hard time with the concept and may not be ready to move on to independent practice. Common Core practice and small group instruction, which is 20 minutes of the instructional block. This is when students would move on to what we typically know as independent practice, but in this material it's called Common Core practice. That's because a lot of what they will see is in an EOG-like format. It's also very much aligned to the Common Core practice and for students to work independently to make sure that they understand the concept. So as students are moving on to that independent practice, teachers are then given an opportunity to pull small groups. Now, the first small group that should be pulled should be those students who still struggled with the guided practice. You want to make sure that you're clearing up any misconceptions, any holes, prior to a student moving on to independent practice. There's no point of them practicing independently if they're still struggling with guided practice. So when you're pulling students, you're reviewing any misconceptions or any holes in their thinking prior to them moving on to independent practice. This is also an opportunity for you to pull students based on maybe a unit assessment or a previous lesson where you noticed students struggled with the concept and there were some things that you felt like if you pulled them to the table and worked one-on-one, they would have a firmer understanding of that concept. So that's the purpose of this part of the lesson. The next 15 minutes will be spent on calculator practice. Now, the calculator practice piece gives students an opportunity to practice using the calculator. There's an actual calculator section in each book. We're using Assessment 1 from Curriculum Associates, although we're not expecting you to use it as an assessment. What we want you to do is pull 2 to 3 problems that are aligned to the standard that we worked on today and give students an opportunity just to make sure that they're able to use that calculator. This is a great time for teachers to circulate to make sure students understand how to use the calculator as a tool, maybe do little mini lessons with students who are struggling with using that calculator as a tool. This is also the last part of the 90-minute block. Now, other components of the math instructional block would include remediation lessons, for example. On a day that students take a unit assessment, the next day you would do a remediation lesson. On that next day, that's when you would notice that the schedule is modified to allow for this remediation lesson. The remediation lesson is simply an opportunity for you to go over that unit assessment to make sure students who struggled or did not get problems right on the assessment to get an understanding as to why and get some explicit instruction as to how to solve that problem. This is also an opportunity for students to talk about their thinking, teachers to be able to hear that thinking, talk a lot about by not only the right answer but why did we eliminate some of those wrong choices? Why were the wrong choices the wrong choices? And a lot of times, if you're able to focus on some of those wrong choices, you can help students really understand why the right one and what concepts we used and what strategies we used to get that right answer. Also, the last day of the for instruction for math, you'll see test prep and overall review. So in the teacher material, you'll see the most released EOG, but in the math, you will not. The purpose is for teachers to use that release test as a resource to pull out any problems that you noticed throughout the 8 days that students struggled with, and using that as an opportunity for either an explicit instruction or for students to collaboratively work together to solve the problems or to explain their thinking or to remind them of strategies that you've given them to solve particular problems. But we really want them to use this day as a review of the last 8 days based on your observation of what area we feel like if we could hit it just one more time or just make sure we cover that particular hole, that students would have a better understanding. So teachers are encouraged to pull out problems that are relevant to what they've observed through the last 8 days, and work through those with students, and really hearing how they think and looking at some of how they've modeled their work, to make sure that they're on right track because they would take that assessment the next day. Now, the last part of the book, you'll notice that there's math activities and hands-on activities. And what we've done is called that PALS, Personalized Academic Labs. So it would be a 90-minute block where you would either be working on iReady on the computer and reading or math, or the hands-on math component. Those are two 45 minutes blocks put together. So it might be that you are doing them back to back or they're split up in your instructional day. But at some point, there'll be a hands-on opportunity and then a computer opportunity, which, like I said, combined together, we're calling personalized academic labs. So a sample day would look like this. As you see, we have the standard. You'll also see the page number next to each section. So what you want to do is to make sure you're aligning yourself with the proper day. And then when you see the first part of the lesson, for example, on this one, you see vocabulary, it's about 5 minutes or 10 minutes, then you can find that on page 128. And you'll see that throughout the lesson for each day. Now, like we spoke about PALS and we talked about the hands-on piece and the online piece combining together, which is a 90-minute block. Separated out, like I said, they are 45-minute blocks. And this portion of that 45-minute block is called math activities and games. What we've done is we made sure that every concept that we taught in the 90-minute block is here, also giving students an opportunity to do that kind of hands-on, fun learning piece, to make sure that they really understand that concept. So just like with the lessons, these math activities are broken out by day, by standard. The biggest piece is that they tell you the name of the game that we're focusing on for that day and the materials that you will need to facilitate that activity for the day. And that's the same for 7th grade and 8th grade. So what we are asking is that the lessons that are provided are explicitly followed. You will not need to plan for lessons. However, you will need to read over your lessons prior to. You will need to correct assessments the day before because they lend themselves into the next day's lesson. And also you would need to look at your math activities if you're over that piece of it, making sure that you have all the materials necessary to facilitate those activities. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact Justine Ward. You can see her information on the screen. Thank you very much.